Subscribe, like, and comment if you believe patience is not weakness, but strength waiting for the right moment. The chamber of the Galactic Council shimmered with arrogance that day, filled with the cold laughter of civilizations that had seen empires rise and fall for millennia. At the center of it all, humanity's name became the subject of mockery. The council called them soft, fragile, sentimental creatures. A species that hid behind diplomacy because they were afraid to bleed. Their representatives stood quiet, hands folded, faces expressionless, as alien delegates took turns ridiculing the idea of humans being part of a defense coalition. To them, war was a game of reputation, something that defined power among the stars. The ancient reptilian dynasties, who once burned 3 moons for honor, sneered that humans lacked the instinct to dominate. The crystalline intellects of Virus claimed that humanity's compassion was a weakness, an emotional flaw incompatible with conquest. Even the machine intelligences, cold and analytical, labeled them statistically insignificant in military terms. The laughter wasn't cruel by intent. It was worse, condescending amusement from those who believed themselves beyond consequence. The council's speaker, an elder of the Kyther Dominion, raised a clawed hand and addressed the chamber. Humans fear war because they have forgotten what it means to fight. They build art, trade, and diplomacy. Admirable pursuits, but fragile foundations in a galaxy built on conflict. His voice echoed through the spire, met with murmurs of agreement. The vote to remove Earth from the Galactic Defense Pact passed almost unanimously. The reasoning was simple: humans added little strategic value, and their pacifism slowed down collective military decisions. Yet, amid the jeers, a few observed quietly. The archivist of the old Zoth Empire, who had studied extinct worlds, whispered a note of concern. A species that survived self-destruction should not be underestimated. But his words were drowned by laughter. The official records would later show the motion as routine administrative realignment. In truth, it was humiliation written into history. Humanity's ambassador, a woman named Sarah Lorne, recorded every statement. Her eyes never flinched, even as the chamber mocked her world. She bowed once before leaving, saying only, "History tends to remember laughter differently." The following cycles saw the council's confidence swell. They viewed the Terrans as a solved problem, a pacifist race too proud to protest. Trade routes remained open, treaties stayed intact, and Earth quietly continued exporting technology, medicine, and energy systems. The galaxy took human generosity for granted, calling it compliance. They never wondered why humans never argued. They never asked why, despite exclusion, humanity didn't protest, retaliate, or beg to return to the pact. In the void between stars, however, something subtle shifted. The tone of human transmissions changed, shorter, colder, fewer words, fewer smiles. Their embassies began closing one by one, citing restructuring. No one cared. Why would they? The peaceful ones were withdrawing. The galaxy's attention moved on to border disputes and political posturing, leaving Earth forgotten. Forgotten, except by the few who sensed a silence too deliberate to be accidental. It was said among old traders who had visited the Sol system that the stars there looked different, quieter, heavier somehow, like they were holding their breath. The council dismissed such talk as superstition. After all, what could the humans possibly do? Their fleets were small, their numbers limited, their courage a rumor from an age long gone. The galaxy laughed, secure in the belief that no race that built art so beautifully could ever build vengeance as efficiently. And yet, beneath that laughter, something ancient stirred within humanity's collective memory, the awareness that peace was not granted, it was maintained. The council saw kindness and mistook it for fear. They saw patience and assumed weakness. They failed to understand that humanity had not abandoned war, they had only mastered restraint. When humanity left that hall of arrogance for the last time, the stars themselves seemed to dim, as if the universe understood a truth the council did not. The humans were quiet because they were measuring the cost of silence. And when they would finally speak, the galaxy would learn that the species everyone mocked did not fear war. They feared what they might become if they ever embraced it again. Subscribe, like, and comment if you believe silence is the calm before humanity's storm. The insult faded into memory for most of the galaxy, but not for Earth. What began as laughter in the council halls turned into a cold calculation behind closed doors. Every human leader, strategist, and engineer understood the message. They were deemed harmless. That label, repeated often enough, became an opportunity. Humanity had been mocked before in its own history, and survived worse. This time, they would not react with words or outrage. They would prepare. Months passed without diplomatic messages from Earth. The last ambassador's shuttle returned home, and human embassies across Allied systems closed under the excuse of resource restructuring. No one cared. They believed the Terrans were retreating into isolation, humiliated beyond return. Then came the spark. On a quiet mining world at the edge of human territory, a Council patrol fleet entered orbit. By navigational error. The incident should have been minor, except the patrol's bombardment system misfired. Entire settlements vanished in a storm of plasma. Thousands of civilians turned to ash. The Council called it an unfortunate accident and sent condolences that sounded more like dismissal. Humanity did not respond. No speech, no threat, not even an acknowledgement. But satellites stopped transmitting. Communication relays went dark. Civilian transport lanes near human sectors were rerouted overnight. The galaxy's data networks filled with speculation, but the official explanation remained the same. Earth is undergoing internal reforms. Traders noticed something stranger. Human freighters were no longer carrying luxury goods or art. Their holds were filled with raw alloys, fusion cores, and industrial components. Orbital stations, once filled with light and commerce, sealed their ports and began rotating in perfect synchronization. Within weeks, the Sol system withdrew entirely from the galactic mesh. AI analysts from multiple species concluded that humanity was suffering political collapse, perhaps civil war. The Council dismissed the issue again. "They'll destroy themselves," one delegate said. "It's their nature." Yet intelligence captains monitoring deep space routes began filing reports of massive energy signatures in the asteroid belts near Jupiter and Titan, patterns consistent with shipyards. When scouts tried to approach, their drones returned melted, sensors fried by unknown electromagnetic pulses. No one claimed responsibility, but one thing was clear: the humans were not idle. The silence spread outward like a contagion. One by one, human colonies stopped broadcasting civilian signals. No distress calls, no complaints, no traffic logs. Only static. The few messages intercepted carried encrypted bursts tagged with the same signature: TA Command Authorization. Analysts later decrypted it: Terran Accord. The phrase appeared nowhere in Council records. It meant something new, something unified. Humanity had done what no galactic power expected. They had dissolved nations, borders, and politics to form one collective military entity. The first visible shift came from the outer stations orbiting Alpha Centauri. Automated defense systems reactivated after decades of dormancy. Observers recorded swarms of drones moving in geometric formations, assembling megastructures in silence. For the first time, alien observers felt unease. The humans were no longer speaking, but their actions were deafening. Freight haulers disappeared, then reappeared with modular frames attached, frames that looked suspiciously like heavy cruiser hulls. Rumors began spreading among merchant guilds that entire shipyards had been hidden under false registries, disguised as orbital gardens and solar farms. Human logistics fleets, famous for their efficiency, were now operating under complete blackout. Every shipment vanished into secured sectors, and nobody asked questions. Fear started to ripple, not from what was seen, but from what wasn't. Meanwhile, the Council drafted a message of reassurance, calling for calm and continued faith in collective governance. It was sent toward Earth. It was never acknowledged. By the time they realized no one was listening, it was too late. Humanity's silence had transformed from humiliation into intent. The peaceful race they had dismissed was building something immense, deliberate, and terrifyingly organized. No propaganda, no declarations, no promises of revenge. Just quiet preparation. The universe misread that quiet as surrender. It wasn't. Humanity was counting, measuring, planning, because when they finally moved, they would not argue, they would not warn, and they would not repeat the mistakes of those who laughed first. Subscribe, like, and comment if you believe silence can be the deadliest weapon. A year passed since Earth's voice vanished from galactic communication. The Council had grown comfortable again, convinced humanity's isolation was self-inflicted. Patrol routes were redrawn, border claims extended, and Terran space was marked as abandoned on navigation charts. Then, without warning, that illusion shattered. At the far edge of the Orion Spur, a Council reconnaissance fleet detected faint transponder echoes. Routine scans returned nothing but static. Moments later, every ship in the formation disintegrated, no distress calls, no energy spikes, only fractured debris drifting in the void. The logs showed a blank horizon, then darkness. At first, officials dismissed the incident as a spatial anomaly. But then another fleet vanished. Then a third. Each time, the same pattern: total silence, no survivors, no trace of conventional weapons. Within weeks, panic whispered through command channels. When military analysts overlaid the disappearance sites, a chilling realization emerged. They formed a perfect perimeter around Council-controlled space. Humanity hadn't collapsed. They had been watching, waiting, mapping every weakness. Intelligence networks scrambled to understand how Terrans had advanced so far in such a short time. Probes sent toward the Sol system never returned. Surveillance drones deployed to intercept human signals burned out within seconds. One report survived partially intact, transmitted by a crippled virus probe. It contained 2 words in human code: phase commence. The message triggered emergency summits across the galaxy. Armadas were mobilized, defense grids powered up, and entire sectors placed under martial alert. Still, no human demands arrived. No threats, no broadcasts, no speeches. Only the expanding void of silence moving closer each day. Then came the first verified contact. At the Hellion Belt, a Council fleet composed of 12 battleships encountered human vessels for the first time in a year. What they saw defied every classification. The ships were sleek, matte black, with energy signatures suppressed so efficiently that scanners registered them as asteroids until the first volley struck. The engagement lasted 48 seconds. When it ended, nothing remained of the fleet except fragments cooling in the dark. Data retrieved from the wreckage revealed no identifiable weapon residue, no standard propulsion trails. The entire attack had been executed without visible light, sound, or signal, pure precision. Across the galaxy, the old perception of humans as hesitant pacifists evaporated. Systems once mocking their cowardice now fortified their orbits in panic. But no fleet could defend against an enemy that refused to communicate or reveal itself. Terran operations followed a terrifying pattern: target communications first, then logistics, then command. Entire sectors were isolated within hours. Councils met to debate ceasefire terms, but there was no one to negotiate with. Humanity had not declared war. They had simply begun it. The Terran Accords doctrine became clear only through its results. Power stations were disabled, not destroyed. Civilian populations were left unharmed. Weapons depots vanished overnight, entire garrisons waking to find their ships dismantled and orbiting in pieces. Every move demonstrated intent without cruelty, efficiency without emotion. The message beneath their silence became unmistakable. This is what restraint looks like when forced to act. The panic in the higher ranks of the Galactic Council deepened into disbelief. How had humans achieved such mastery so quickly? The answer came from within their own archives. Buried reports revealed that human technology, long underestimated, had been advancing quietly under the guise of peaceful research. Their innovation wasn't new, it had been hidden behind diplomacy, protected by humility. They had studied every fleet, every system, every weakness of the Council that mocked them. And now, they were applying that knowledge with surgical precision. Each strike was a statement, each silence a sentence. The races that once laughed finally understood the cost of their arrogance. Humanity had not returned seeking conquest. They had come to remind the galaxy that peace had always been their choice, not their limitation. The silence that once made them seem weak was now the sound of inevitability approaching. Subscribe, like, and comment if you believe mercy is the sharpest edge of strength. The galaxy had never known fear like this, an enemy that did not speak, did not boast, did not gloat. Every council world waited for a declaration that never came. Instead, one by one, the networks linking their civilizations fell silent. Fleets launched to investigate found themselves surrounded by human vessels, their targeting systems jammed before a single shot could be fired. Then came the message, 5 words, transmitted across every frequency: "We are not your enemies." It wasn't a threat, it was a verdict. The council chamber filled again, but the arrogance that once echoed through its walls was gone. Panic replaced mockery. Reports described entire fleets immobilized in place, weapons disabled with surgical precision. No prisoners taken, no executions, no destruction beyond necessity. Humanity had achieved total dominance yet refused to exploit it. That restraint frightened the galaxy more than any weapon ever could. They realized humanity had chosen peace before, and that was the only reason anyone was still alive to understand their mistake. Attempts to open communication were met with silence. The Terran Accord operated without diplomats, intermediaries, or negotiators. Their actions were their message. When council representatives sent envoys toward Earth to plead for truce, their ships were gently intercepted, engines shut down remotely, then escorted back unharmed. No retaliation, no humiliation. Only control. The power imbalance was absolute. For every human vessel that appeared, 10 disappeared from sensors before approach. The galaxy began to comprehend the unthinkable truth. Humans had learned how to fight without hatred, to wage war without chaos, to win without destruction. Strategists across the council struggled to understand the purpose behind the campaign. There were no invasions, no occupation of territory, no demand for resources or tribute. The humans didn't want submission, they wanted recognition. Every strike, every moment of silence, was a demand for acknowledgement that they were not weak, not naive, not afraid. The Terran Accord didn't want to be obeyed. They wanted to be remembered. Council intelligence divisions attempted countermeasures, decoy transmissions, sensor interference, false targets, but the humans were always several steps ahead. They didn't jam communications, they rewrote the signals themselves. Commanders found their own orders altered mid-transmission, replaced with new directives signed by Terran Command. Entire fleets accidentally retreated or disarmed themselves, not by force, but by manipulation so seamless it appeared voluntary. It was the ultimate humiliation, humanity controlling the war without firing a single shot unless provoked. When they finally gathered the courage to assemble a defensive coalition around the central capital, they found the Terran fleets already waiting. Not attacking, not advancing, simply present, stationary, an armada in perfect formation around the system. The humans did not fire. They only transmitted a single statement into every ship's bridge simultaneously: "We could end this. We choose not to." That phrase shattered the illusion of superiority the galaxy had built for centuries. Every commander, every leader, every citizen realized what true power looked like. It wasn't dominance through violence, it was mastery through choice. Humanity demonstrated that their so-called fear of war had never been cowardice, it had been understanding. They knew war too intimately, too painfully, to ever glorify it. After days of silence, the Terran fleets began to withdraw. No demands were made, no treaties signed. Systems that had feared annihilation now watched in disbelief as the human ships vanished back into the void, leaving behind nothing but disabled fleets and quiet worlds. In the end, the Council convened to sign its own declaration, a document acknowledging human sovereignty and promising never again to question their right to stand among the stars. Yet even as the Council celebrated survival, unease lingered. They had witnessed a species capable of total domination but guided by restraint. The lesson was simple and terrifying. Humanity feared war not because they lacked courage, but because they understood what it would cost if they ever stopped restraining themselves. Their mercy had spared the galaxy, and that mercy was the only reason anyone remained to remember it. Subscribe, like, and comment if you believe the strongest hands are the ones that choose not to close into fists. Decades passed after the Terran fleets vanished beyond the edge of map space. The Council rebuilt what it could, but its pride never recovered. In every academy and training program across the galaxy, new officers studied the event that redefined interstellar law, the Terran response. No one dared call it a war. That would imply two sides had fought. It was something else entirely, a demonstration. Every lesson began with the same warning: never mistake silence for surrender. The human systems reopened contact years later, quietly, formally, without hostility. Trade resumed under strict neutrality protocols. Their diplomats, when they spoke, did so with precision, never emotional, never provocative. They treated their former mockers not as enemies, but as students. Humanity had proven its point and had no interest in gloating. Their representatives at new council assemblies spoke rarely, but when they did, the chamber listened. The same species once dismissed as fragile now dictated the rhythm of peace through the weight of unspoken authority. Worlds that had once celebrated dominance now patterned their militaries after Terran doctrine. Entire academies devoted themselves to understanding the principles of silent warfare, efficient defense, and proportional response. Every strategic model, every combat algorithm bore traces of human design, balance between strength and mercy. Alien officers quoted human philosophy as sacred text. Power is only real when you don't need to use it. It became a universal creed. In the decades that followed, the term, Terran fear, entered the political vocabulary. It no longer meant cowardice, it meant wisdom, restraint, and an understanding of limits. When rival species clashed, they invoked the Terran example to remind themselves where arrogance led. Even the oldest empires restructured their governance to include human advisors, believing proximity to their insight brought stability. What once was laughter turned to reverence, almost worship. Yet humanity never sought that reverence. They withdrew gradually from interstellar politics, content to observe from the quiet of their homeworlds. Earth became legend, a mythic seat of wisdom where even the most advanced species sent emissaries in hopes of learning the secret to peace. But humanity offered no secret. They only said that peace was not found in treaties or fleets, but in discipline, the choice not to act when capable of destruction. Generations later, the original witnesses of the Council's arrogance were gone, but the story endured. Every child across 1,000 systems learned it as history, how the species once mocked as timid brought the galaxy to its knees without cruelty. Scholars called it the era of the measured hand. To others, it was a reminder that civilization itself owed its survival to the mercy of one race that had refused to become what the rest of the galaxy already was. The myth took on its own life. Some said the Terrans still watched from the shadows, guarding the balance, ready to intervene if arrogance rose again. Others believed they had transcended the need for conflict entirely, evolving beyond the cycle of dominance that enslaved so many. Whatever the truth, the silence of humanity became sacred. Entire cultures built monuments to it, vast halls of glass where no one spoke, only listened. Among the last surviving council members, an old phrase resurfaced, spoken with reverence rather than scorn. Humans are afraid of war. But its meaning had changed forever. It now stood for understanding born from experience, compassion forged from scars. To be afraid of war meant to remember it, to respect it, to never unleash it without purpose. And so, the galaxy carried that fear as a shield, not a shame. Every star, every station, every academy repeated the same final words inscribed into the archives of Orion Prime. They laughed once, saying humans feared war. They never laughed again.